On a cold Saturday morning in my kitchen, my son dropped two packed suitcases by the front door and told me to watch the grandchildren for the weekend. I shook my head and said, "I can't." He didn't hesitate. He looked me straight in the eyes and replied, "The dead don't need you. Your living family does." I stood there, speechless. 3 days later, one innocent question from my grandson exposed a lie so cruel it destroyed everything I thought I knew about my own son. Take a breath with me before we begin. Before we continue, drop a quick comment and tell me what's the weather like where you are right now. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection. The message, the lesson at its heart, is what I hope stays with you. I told my son I couldn't watch the grandchildren that Saturday morning, my voice shaking as I explained that my brother Vincent's funeral was in 3 days, and I needed to be there to say goodbye to the man who saved my life. Clayton didn't blink. He stood in the kitchen doorway I'd rebuilt with my own hands 30 years ago, filling it with his charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. His jaw set with the kind of determination I'd once admired in him, but now made my stomach turn. At 71, I'd built this house to last generations. I never imagined I'd stand at the granite countertop I'd installed myself and realize I no longer knew my own son. "Dad, we need you to take the kids," Clayton said, not asked. "Emergency merger in New York, we leave in an hour." Behind him, my daughter-in-law Faye stood with her perfectly styled auburn hair and a sympathetic expression I would later recognize as the mask of someone who'd already decided my fate. 15 years of family dinners, and I'd never noticed how well she could perform concern. My 14-year-old grandson Soren watched the adults with dark, serious eyes that seemed to see more than most teenagers did. His backpack already sliding off one shoulder as if he knew he was staying. 11-year-old Marina clutched her stuffed elephant and looked between her parents and me with the kind of confusion that would haunt me later. She didn't understand why Grandpa looked so sad, and I couldn't tell her it was because her father had just broken my heart. "I can't," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "Vincent's funeral is Tuesday. I have to be there." Clayton set his briefcase down with a deliberate click against the hardwood floor. "Surely you can miss the planning meetings. The funeral isn't until Tuesday." I gripped the counter's edge, feeling the cold stone beneath my palms. Vincent had helped me install this counter in 1993, joking that it was strong enough to survive anything short of a nuclear blast. I wondered if it could survive this. "Your uncle died last night," I said, looking at my son and searching for something I recognized. "This isn't about meetings. This is about being there for him. The dead don't need goodbyes, Dad." Clayton's words came out flat-measured. "We do. Your living family needs you." Faye stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor I'd refinished the year Eleanor died. "Think of the children, Walter. If we lose this merger, the company goes under. Everything we've built." I wanted to ask what they'd built that was more important than letting a man attend his brother's funeral. I wanted to ask when my son had become someone who could stand in my kitchen 24 hours after Vincent's death and talk about business mergers. But Soren was watching me with those two old eyes, and Marina was starting to cry quietly into her elephant's worn fabric, and I felt the words die in my throat. "Vincent broke both his legs, saving my life," I said instead, and I was talking to Clayton but looking at the floor because I couldn't bear to see whatever was in his eyes. 1983 Delaware River Bridge construction site. He saw a steel beam falling toward me and threw himself into its path. Shattered both legs in 7 places. He was in a wheelchair for 6 months and walked with a limp for the rest of his life. The silence stretched out like a held breath. "I owe him this," I finished. Clayton picked up his briefcase. The dead don't know who attends their funerals, Dad. But the living family needs you now. We need you. How do you tell your own son that the only reason you're standing in this kitchen is because your brother chose to shatter his legs instead of letting you die? I looked at Faye, hoping for something, an acknowledgement that this was cruel, a moment of hesitation, anything. She met my eyes with that same practiced sympathy. Walter, she said softly, and I hated how she used my first name like we were equals instead of the woman who'd married into my family 15 years ago. You're asking us to choose between a memorial service and our children's future. If this merger falls through, we lose the house. We lose everything. Is that what Vincent would have wanted, for you to let his niece and nephew suffer? I felt something crack inside my chest. Clayton was already moving, picking up the children's overnight bags from where they'd set them by the door. When had they brought those inside? I hadn't even noticed. The choreography of it struck me then. They'd already made the decision. This conversation was just performance. We're already late, Clayton said, checking his watch. The kids' bags are packed. We'll be back Sunday night. The smell of coffee from the pot I'd brewed an hour earlier before I knew my Saturday would turn into this had gone cold and bitter on the counter. Through the window, early December, sunlight slanted across the backyard, where I'd taught Clayton to use a level when he was 10, where we'd built a treehouse together the summer before Eleanor got sick. That boy who'd handed me nails and asked careful questions about load-bearing weight was gone. I didn't know this man in the expensive suit who wielded guilt like a carpenter's hammer. I'll do it, I heard myself say. Go. Marina stopped crying. Soren's shoulders relaxed slightly. Faye smiled and touched my arm with her manicured hand, and I fought the urge to pull away. Thank you, Walter, she said. We knew you'd understand. Clayton was already halfway to the door, already pulling out his phone, already moving past this moment, like it was just another item checked off a list. He paused at the threshold, looked back at me with something in his eyes I couldn't quite name, and said, We appreciate this, Dad. The kids will be fine with you. Then they were gone. I stood at the kitchen window watching Clayton's black Mercedes disappear down the tree-lined street, my grandson Soren's small hand finding mine. Something in my son's eyes as he'd backed out of the driveway had been wrong cold and measured in a way I'd never seen before. Even in our worst arguments, even when Eleanor died, and grief made us all say things we regretted. I couldn't name it then, standing there with my brother barely cold in the morgue, and two confused children looking up at me for reassurance. But 3 days later, sitting alone in the dark, I would finally understand what I'd seen. It was the look of a man executing a carefully timed plan. The car was still visible at the end of the street when Soren's voice cut through the December morning air like a blade I didn't see coming. Grandpa, why did Mom and Dad pack snowboards if they're going to New York for a business meeting? I turned from the window, my 14-year-old grandson standing beside me on the front porch with his hands in his jacket pockets. Marina had already wandered inside, but Soren stayed, his dark eyes fixed on me with that unsettling awareness he'd inherited from Eleanor. What do you mean, snowboards? I asked, though something cold was already forming in my stomach. I saw the bag when Dad was loading the trunk, the orange one he bought last year, and Mom's ski goggles were in the side pocket. I replayed the moment in my mind, Clayton at the trunk movements, quick and efficient, me standing in the doorway with grief still thick in my throat. I had glimpsed something orange. I'd dismissed it. Maybe there's a ski resort near the city, I heard myself say. I'm sure there's an explanation. Soren looked at me with patient disappointment that made him seem 40 instead of 14. Mom specifically said it was meetings in an office building. She said they wouldn't even have time to see the Statue of Liberty. A 14-year-old's curiosity had just done what 45 years of fatherhood hadn't shown me. My son was capable of looking me in the eye and lying about something that mattered. Let's get you and your sister settled inside, I said. 30 minutes later, with both children absorbed in a nature documentary, I stood in my kitchen, by the same granite countertop, where Clayton had delivered his performance about emergency mergers. My phone sat on the stone surface, dark and accusing. 6 months ago, Faye had insisted on installing a family tracking app. For safety, she'd said, so we always know everyone's okay. I'd thought it was paranoid, but harmless. I opened the app with shaking hands. The interface loaded slowly, a map of Philadelphia spreading across the screen. Blue dots marked each family member's location. Marina was here. Soren was here. I was here. Clayton's dot pulsed about 20 miles northwest of my house, moving steadily, but not toward Philadelphia International Airport. The airport was south. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to correct itself, waiting for the blue dot to curve around and head the right direction. The technology must be wrong. The dot kept moving northwest. There must be a mistake, I whispered to the empty kitchen. The app must be wrong. But I'd built my career on understanding systems, electrical, structural, mechanical. I knew how GPS worked. I knew the margin of error. This wasn't error. This was data. Why would a man install a family tracking app on his father's phone, then forget it's there when he lies about his destination? I tapped the blue dot with a finger that had installed this countertop, that had wired this house, that had held my son when he was born. The app cheerfully expanded, showing details I hadn't known it tracked. Predicted destination based on route and calendar, the screen announced. Private airfield, Chester County. Not Philadelphia International. Not a commercial flight to New York. A private airfield. I tapped again, demanding more information, demanding proof. The app obliged, pulling calendar data it had synchronized from Clayton's phone, the same calendar Faye had connected to mine months ago. Charter flight from Chester County Airfield to Lake Tahoe, California, departing 11:00 a.m. Saturday. Return flight Sunday evening 6:00 p.m. Not New York. Not a merger. A luxury ski resort. I set the phone on the counter carefully and turned to look out the kitchen window at the garden Eleanor and I had planted tree by tree, rows by rows. The December morning light slanted across the dormant beds where spring bulbs waited underground. We'd chosen every plant together, built something that bloomed. For the first time since Vincent died 36 hours ago, I felt something other than grief. I felt cold. Lake Tahoe, I said aloud to the empty room. Charter flight, round trip, returning Sunday evening. My son had stood in this kitchen and looked me in the eyes. He'd talked about emergency mergers. He'd weaponized my grandchildren's future against me. He'd used Vincent's death, Vincent, who'd broken both legs, saving my life, as an opportunity to manipulate me into watching his children while he went on vacation. Not just vacation, luxury vacation, private charter, Lake Tahoe in December when the skiing was pristine and expensive, while his uncle's body waited in a morgue for a funeral his father couldn't attend. He lied, I whispered. My son looked me in the eyes and lied. The phone screen had gone dark. I picked it up again, opened the app again, stared at that blue dot still moving northwest toward Chester County Airfield. The calendar notification mocked me. Emergency board meeting NYC, entire weekend. Clayton had even created a fake calendar entry. Not a spontaneous lie told in the moment. A planned deception, scheduled and synchronized. I stood at that kitchen window, phone still glowing with the damning blue dot on the map, and felt everything I thought I understood shift beneath my feet. If Clayton lied about Lake Tahoe, if he manipulated me into missing Vincent's funeral for a ski vacation, what else had he planned? The granite countertop beneath my palm was cold and solid. The same stone I'd chosen and installed 30 years ago, when I still thought I knew how to build something that would last. I had been wrong about more than countertops. The question of what else Clayton had engineered followed me through the rest of that Saturday, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I made the children dinner. I helped Marina with her homework. I read Soren a chapter from a book about bridges, ironic given what I was beginning to understand about structural failure. Then at bedtime I found the first piece of hardware. The small black device fell out of Marina's overnight bag as I searched for her pajamas, landing on the guest bedroom carpet with barely a sound. But in my mind, it landed like a brick through a window. I picked it up, while my 11-year-old granddaughter brushed her teeth in the bathroom down the hall. The device was roughly the size of a deck of cards, matte black plastic with no brand markings, no labels, no manufacturer identification. Two small LED indicators on one edge, currently dark. A micro USB port on the bottom. My hands didn't shake as I turned the black device over in my palm. An engineer's hands never shake when there's a problem to solve. Even when that problem is discovering your own child has turned your home into a cage. I'd spent 40 years as a bridge engineer, which meant 40 years of understanding not just concrete and steel, but also the electrical systems that ran through every structure I designed. I recognized this device immediately. A signal repeater, designed to amplify and extend the range of wireless transmissions. But transmit what? And why would it be hidden in an 11-year-old's overnight bag? Grandpa Marina's voice came from the doorway, toothbrush still in her hand. Did you find my pajamas? I slipped the device into my pocket, with the smooth casualness of someone who'd spent 71 years learning not to alarm children. Right here, sweetheart, I said, pulling the pajamas from the bag. Go get changed. I'll tuck you in. 15 minutes later, with both children asleep in their rooms, I stood in the upstairs hallway and pulled the device from my pocket again. Signal strength. Range extension. But for what signal? They didn't just lie about Lake Tahoe, I whispered to the empty hallway. They planted hardware in my house. The realization settled over me like cold water. An engineer doesn't install a repeater unless there's something to repeat. Cameras, microphones, something that needed stronger signal to transmit data from inside my house to somewhere outside it. I began moving through my home with the methodical eye I'd once used for structural inspections, no longer seeing it as the sanctuary Eleanor and I had built, but as a potential surveillance grid. Evaluating sightlines, power sources, coverage angles. 40 years of reading blueprints had taught me to see what others missed, the optimal placement points for any system, including covert observation. I'd spent a lifetime understanding how buildings distribute weight and stress, but I'd never thought to read my own son as a blueprint, to see the stress fractures forming in the foundation of who I thought he was. I started with the living room. Constant power source check, wide field of view check, elevated position for downward angle check. I looked up at the smoke detector mounted in the center of the ceiling. Its white plastic case exactly where it should be, exactly where I'd installed it myself 10 years ago, when Eleanor insisted we upgrade the safety systems. Except the ventilation grate on the side seemed slightly different than I remembered. The holes were smaller, more precise. I dragged a chair from the dining room, climbed up with joints that protested the movement, and examined the smoke detector up close. There, barely visible behind the grate, a tiny glass lens no bigger than a pinhead angled down toward my reading chair. There you are, I whispered. Clever placement. I would have chosen the same spot. I climbed down and moved to the bookshelf, running my engineer's eye over the family photos Eleanor had arranged with such care. The frame holding a picture of Clayton's college graduation angled slightly toward the center of the room, instead of straight forward like the others. I lifted it carefully, turned it around. The back panel had been modified. Another pinhole lens positioned to capture whoever sat in my usual chair by the fireplace. The kitchen came next. The decorative wall clock that Faye had given me 2 Christmases ago positioned at perfect eye level above the breakfast nook. I didn't even need to take it down. The tiny lens was visible once you knew to look for it, hidden in the shadow of the number 6. 3 cameras, overlapping fields of view, full coverage of my daily routine. I stood in the center of the living room and turned off all the lights, letting the darkness settle around me like a blanket. Somewhere those 3 cameras were recording in infrared, capturing my silhouette in the dim glow from the street lamps outside. My son had done this. Had stood in this house maybe during one of his visits, maybe during a holiday dinner, maybe while I was at Vincent's bedside in those final weeks, and installed surveillance equipment to watch his own father. The rage that swept through me was white-hot and immediate, demanding I reach up and rip those cameras from the walls, smash them on the floor, destroy every piece of this invasion. But I was an engineer, and engineers don't tear down failing structures in blind rage. We map every weakness, every load-bearing point, every hidden stress fracture, and then we bring the whole thing down with precision. If they want a show, I whispered to the darkness and the cameras recording it, I'll give them one, but it wouldn't be the show they'd scripted. Let them watch their feeds from Lake Tahoe. Let them see the grieving old man, confused and manageable, exactly what they expected. While they watched their screens, I would be doing what I'd spent a lifetime perfecting, building something they couldn't see until it was too late to stop. I walked to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea with hands that were steady as the steel beams I'd once designed, and sat in my reading chair directly in view of all 3 cameras. I opened a book about bridge construction, the same book I'd been reading the night Vincent died, and turned pages I didn't see while my mind worked through the engineering problem my son had just handed me. They'd built a surveillance system. Fine. But every system has vulnerabilities. Every structure has points of failure. I just needed to find them. And then I needed to know exactly how deep this operation went, which meant calling in someone who owed me a favor and understood these systems better than I did. At 7 Sunday morning, while the children still slept, and the house held its breath in early winter silence, I made the first call that would begin dismantling my son's carefully constructed trap to a man who owed me a favor and knew how to read the language of hidden wires. Roy Brennan arrived 45 minutes later, a wiry 50-something security systems specialist, with 15 years of gratitude for the day my engineering testimony saved his building inspection license. He carried a diagnostic kit and asked no questions when I told him I needed a routine electrical inspection focused on the basement. Looking for anything specific? He asked as we descended the stairs. A network traffic, I said. Unusual data transmissions. Roy worked in silence for 20 minutes, running cables through diagnostic equipment, tracing signal pathways with methodical precision. Finally, he straightened up from the junction box. Professional-grade setup, he said. Installed maybe 10-12 days ago. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Can you trace the admin account? Roy tapped his tablet. Ward Development LLC. That's your son's company, isn't it? The basement suddenly felt colder. Not a hired professional. Not some contractor Clayton could deny knowing. His own company. His own hands climbing ladders in this house, drilling holes in ceilings, running wires through walls. You want me to pull the feeds down? Roy asked. Kill the whole system? No, I said. Leave everything exactly as it is. I just needed to know where they are. Roy packed his equipment and left through the back door the same way he'd arrived, quietly, without disturbing the children. I stood alone in the basement, feeling the weight of those cameras recording empty rooms above me, and understood something fundamental had shifted. My son hadn't just lied about Lake Tahoe. He'd stood in this house and planned where to install surveillance equipment to watch his own father. That afternoon during the children's nap, I carefully removed the picture frame camera from the bookshelf and extracted the micro SD backup card from its housing, a redundant local copy. I noted separate from whatever cloud transmission the system used. Roy had mentioned the setup mirrored feeds off-site, but the cameras also retained physical backup storage. an engineer's redundancy, one that would work against them. On my laptop in the home office, I opened the card's contents, dozens of short video clips, each expertly edited and labeled. I clicked the first one, clip 14, subject fails to recognize grandson. The footage showed me standing in the kitchen staring at Soren with apparent confusion. But I remembered that moment. I'd been joking with him, pretending not to know who he was to make him laugh. The video cut out the smile, the laughter, Soren rolling his eyes and saying, "Very funny, Grandpa." What remained looked like genuine cognitive failure. Clip 23. Subject demonstrates unsafe behavior with minor. The footage showed me pulling Soren sharply away from the bookshelf, the one I'd built 20 years ago, that was now coming loose from the wall. But the clip began mid-motion, making it look like I'd shoved him toward danger instead of away from it. Every moment of care edited into evidence of danger. Every act of love twisted into incompetence. "You're not just watching me," I whispered to the empty office. "You're building a case." I'd spent 3 decades teaching my son to read blueprints, to see the hidden structure beneath surface appearance. And he'd learned the lesson so well, he could now build a structure designed to bury me using my own life as the raw material. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, listening to the house settle around me. Everything sounded normal. Everything looked normal. But nothing was. That night, after tucking both children into bed, I returned downstairs with a purpose that felt like cold water in my veins. Clayton had converted the guest room into a temporary office, a desk, a filing cabinet, a locked drawer he thought was secure. I'd been picking locks since I was a teenager. The guest room drawer opened in less than 30 seconds. Inside, beneath folders labeled with property development projects, I found a notice from a national bank. The letterhead was crisp and official. The amount made my breath catch. Home Equity Line of Credit. I read aloud to the empty room. Principal amount $600,000. Borrower Walter James Ward. My eyes tracked down to the signature line. There it was. My signature. The distinctive loops in the W I'd practiced since I was 22. The slight rightward slant Eleanor used to tease me about. The way the A connected to the R in Ward. Perfect. Except I had never set foot in that bank branch. Never spoken to a loan officer. Never authorized a single dollar against the house I'd built with my own hands. That's my signature," I whispered. "But I never signed this." A signature is supposed to be the one thing that can't be stolen, more unique than a key, more personal than a password. But my son had studied my hand the way a counterfeiter studies currency, learning to replicate not just the shape, but the pressure and rhythm of the only name I'd ever owned. $600,000. Secured against my $1.9 million home. The house Eleanor and I had saved for, planned for, built together over 3 decades. "You didn't just forge this," I said to the document. "You studied how I write. You practiced my hand." I sat in Clayton's office chair as the full shape of the conspiracy finally came into focus. The cameras weren't just watching, they were manufacturing evidence of incompetence. The edited videos weren't just documentation, they were building a legal case. And this loan secured with a signature I'd never written, but could never prove, wasn't mine, was the endgame. Strip me of my home, my savings, my independence. But a signature doesn't appear on a bank document without authorization. Somewhere, somehow, Clayton had obtained a power of attorney I didn't remember signing. And I needed to know when, where, and how he'd gotten me to hand him that weapon. At 2 in the morning, I stood in my dark kitchen, with nothing but the refrigerator's pale light and the weight of a betrayal I still couldn't fully comprehend, and dialed the one man I knew would answer a call at this hour. Without asking why, I couldn't wait until dawn. Kirk Frost answered on the second ring. Despite the ungodly hour, the 58-year-old estate litigation attorney, who'd spent 20 years owing me a debt for the structural engineering testimony that saved his father's collapsing commercial building in 1995, and by extension, saved the family firm. Kirk, it's Walter Ward. I know it's 2 in the morning. I wouldn't call if it wasn't. Walter, stop. I'm awake. Tell me everything. So I did. Standing there in the darkness with the refrigerator humming its familiar rhythm and the December cold seeping through the window glass, I laid out everything I'd discovered in the past 36 hours. The Lake Tahoe lie. The hidden cameras in my smoke detector picture frame and kitchen clock. The signal repeater planted in Marina's overnight bag. The edited video clips building a false narrative of incompetence. And finally, the loan document, $600,000 secured against my home with what appeared to be my perfect signature. Kirk didn't interrupt. I heard the scratch of pen on paper as he took notes. And the signature looks real, I said. Everything about it looks real. But I never signed that loan authorization, Kirk. I've never even been to that bank branch. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 heartbeats. Mew, keep everything exactly as it is, Kirk said finally, his attorney voice replacing the sleepy friend who'd answered. Don't touch the cameras. Don't contact the bank. Don't let Clayton know you found any of this. And for God's sake, don't confront him when he gets back from Lake Tahoe. Give me until morning to start tracing the authorization trail. What if the loan is already dispersed? What if, then we deal with that when I confirm it. Right now, you need to sleep if you can, and I need to make some calls as soon as the sun comes up. I'd spent 40 years as an engineer, understanding that even the strongest structure needs external support during catastrophic stress. Sometimes asking for help isn't weakness. It's the only thing preventing total collapse. Thank you, I said. Oh, get some sleep, Walter. We'll figure this out. But I didn't sleep. I sat in my reading chair in view of all 3 cameras and pretended to doze while my mind worked through a problem I couldn't solve: how to dismantle a conspiracy built by my own son using tools I'd taught him. Kirk called back at 8 Monday morning. Walter, he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. The signature on that loan authorization is real, not forged. You signed it. I was standing at my office window watching the children play in the backyard, and the words didn't make sense at first. That's impossible. I had a handwriting analyst compare it to documents in your estate file. It's genuine. Same pressure variation, same micro tremors in your dominant hand, same ink saturation pattern. You physically signed that authorization, Walter. I gripped the window frame and forced myself to think, to remember. 6 months ago. What had happened 6 months ago? The memory surfaced like something dredged from deep water. Wait, I said. Last June, insurance forms. Faye brought them over, said they were updated policies for the house. She had yellow tabs marking all the signature lines and said, just sign where I've marked Dad. I was exhausted. I'd been working in the garden all day, and I trusted her. But how many forms? I don't know. A stack, maybe 2 inches thick. She sat with me at the kitchen table, flipping pages, pointing at signature lines. I signed maybe 15, 20 documents, and you didn't read them. The question landed like a punch. How many times had I told my engineering students that the most dangerous failures are the ones you cause yourself the bolts you forget to tighten because you trust they're already secure? No, I said quietly. I didn't read them. Eleanor always handled the insurance. 3 years after she died, I still trusted people to handle things the way she would have. Kirk was silent for a moment. Walter, a loan authorization buried in insurance paperwork is nasty, but it's not enough for what I'm seeing here. That authorization just says you agree to borrow against the property. But here's the critical question. Authorization to borrow isn't the same as power of attorney. Where did they get full legal authority over your finances? What do you mean? See, a bank won't issue $600,000 based on a simple authorization form. They need a durable power of attorney, a legal document giving someone else complete control over your financial decisions. Without that, they'd require you to appear in person, show ID, verify your identity, understand the terms. The fact that this loan exists means someone has POA. And that means somewhere, somehow, you signed a much more dangerous document than a loan authorization. I sat down in my office chair before my legs could fail me. I don't remember signing anything like that, I said. I would remember signing away that kind of control. Would you think, Walter? Was there a time when you were vulnerable, grieving, distracted? A moment when someone could have put a document in front of you, and you would have signed without reading because you were too devastated to care about paperwork. Eleanor's face flashed through my mind. The hospital room, the machines stopping, the sound of my own breathing in the silence afterward. No, I need to check something, I said. I'll call you back. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at Kirk's handwritten notes I'd scribbled during our first call. Authorization signed 6/20/2023. POA location unknown. The last piece of my denial crumbled into dust. I had opened the door for them myself with that insurance form signature. But that wasn't the real weapon. Somewhere in my past, during some moment I couldn't yet pinpoint, I had signed a power of attorney document, giving Clayton complete control over my financial life. The question wasn't whether I'd signed it. The question was when and under what circumstances had I been vulnerable enough to hand my son that kind of absolute power. The answer to when I'd signed away my autonomy came not as a gentle realization, but as a sledgehammer to the chest. I knew exactly when I'd been vulnerable enough to sign anything Clayton put in front of me, and the knowing made me want to tear the memory out of my skull rather than face it. I sat at my desk with Kirk's notes spread before me in the Monday morning light, forcing myself to trace backward through 3 years of life. When had I been weak enough? When would I have signed a power of attorney without reading it, without questioning it, without understanding what I was giving away? The candidates narrowed quickly. Not after Vincent's sacrifice in 1983. I'd been young, then resilient, angry at the universe, but not broken. Not during the minor health scares I'd had in my 60s. Not during routine stress or financial worry, or any of the thousand small disasters that make up a normal life. The answer crystallized with the kind of clarity that makes you wish for confusion instead. 3 years ago, a hospital room, monitors beeping their steady countdown, Eleanor's hand growing cold in mine. No, I whispered to the empty office. Not that day. He wouldn't have. Not on that day. But that was exactly when he would. That was exactly the day he'd choose. The flashback pulled me under before I could resist it. Eleanor's final hours in that sterile room, the smell of antiseptic failing to cover the scent of death, the mechanical hiss and beep of machines measuring the gap between my wife's heartbeats. 43 years of marriage ending in front of me, and all I could do was hold her hand and count the seconds between breaths. Clayton appeared in the doorway. I remembered the exact moment, 2:30 in the afternoon, 3 hours before she would stop breathing entirely. He carried a leather folder, his face appropriately solemn, his suit jacket draped over one arm like he'd come straight from a meeting. He said, and his voice had the right texture of grief. I brought the paperwork, hospital billing and funeral arrangements. Just sign where I've flagged you shouldn't have to think about this right now. I'd looked up from Eleanor's face from watching the shallow rise and fall of her chest, and couldn't process what he was saying. I can't focus, I'd said. Eleanor is, I know. Clayton set the folder on the small table beside her bed. I'll handle everything. You just need to sign so the hospital can process everything legally. Here and here and here. Yellow flag tabs marking signature lines. 6 pages. Maybe 7. I couldn't remember the exact number. Clayton had held the folder while I signed one hand on my shoulder in what I'd interpreted as comfort, keeping the pages steady while I scrawled my name beside each bright yellow marker. That's it, he'd said. I'll take care of the rest. You stay with Mom. And he'd left folder tucked under his arm, leaving me alone with my dying wife and the signatures I'd just given him. Funeral arrangements. That's what he'd called them. Funeral arrangements. There's a particular kind of grief that doesn't diminish with time. It's the grief that comes not from death, but from the discovery that someone you loved was calculating profit margins while you were calculating how to survive the next breath without your wife beside you. The flashback released me back into my office. The morning light through the window seemed obscene in its normalcy. Birds singing December sun slanting across the desk where I'd once helped Clayton with his high school geometry homework, teaching him angles and structural integrity and the importance of getting the foundation right. I put my head in my hands and wept. Not the grief I'd processed over 3 years for Eleanor's death. That wound had scarred over tender but bearable. This was fresh anguish for a different kind of death, the death of whatever illusion I'd maintained about who my son had become. Clayton had stood in that hospital room and watched his mother dying and his father breaking, and he'd seen not tragedy but opportunity. He'd chosen that precise moment of maximum vulnerability, that exact hour when love and loss had stripped away every defense to secure the legal weapon that would eventually let him steal everything. You stood there, I said through tears to the empty office. You watched me hold her hand as she died. And you saw a business opportunity. The power of attorney hadn't been signed during a confused elderly man's moment of panic. It hadn't been obtained through aggressive manipulation or obvious coercion. It had been extracted from a grieving husband's breakdown, signed by hands that were shaking, because they'd just felt warmth leaving the woman they'd held for 43 years. Funeral arrangements, I whispered. You called them funeral arrangements. An engineer understands structural failure, how buildings collapse, not from a single blow, but from cumulative stress applied at precisely calculated weak points. And my son had studied me long enough to know exactly where and when to apply pressure to achieve total collapse. He'd waited until Eleanor was dying, but not yet dead, until I was present enough to sign, but too destroyed to read. He'd timed it perfectly. 3 hours before she stopped breathing. Not so early that I might review the documents later with a clear head. Not so late that hospital staff might question the validity of signatures obtained from a man in complete breakdown. Precise, calculated, engineered. I sat at my desk as the tears dried on my face and understood that the power of attorney signed 3 years ago was just the key. Now I needed to trace where Clayton had used it, what doors that key had unlocked, and how much of my life's work had already been stolen while I grieved my wife and trusted my son. The $600,000 loan was too specific a number to be random, too large to be preliminary. That money had gone somewhere. Finding its destination would show me everything Clayton had built on the back of my wife's death. I picked up the phone to call Kirk back, my hand steady despite everything, and felt something shift inside my chest. The grief was still there. The betrayal still burned. But underneath it, growing like steel reinforcement in concrete, was something harder. My son had chosen his weapons carefully. Now it was time to choose mine. The email from Kirk arrived at 11 Monday morning with the subject line, "Wire transfer analysis urgent." And I knew before opening it that whatever was inside would be worse than the theft itself, because money stolen can be traced. But the reason it was stolen reveals the true conspiracy. I clicked it open in my home office morning light, slanting across the desk. where I'd once taught Clayton to draft structural diagrams, and began reading Kirk's detailed financial forensics. The wire transfer trail was exactly what I'd feared, and nothing I'd expected. 3 Delaware shell companies. The primary entity, Apex Holdings LLC, registered just 3 weeks ago in late November. The $600,000 had moved through these corporate ghosts, like water through pipes I couldn't see but could trace by following the pressure. Shell Company Chain. I read aloud to the empty office. Ward Development Holdings to Apex Holdings, LLC to Offshore Trust Account 4472B. But it was the next paragraph that made my hands go cold on the laptop keyboard. The money hadn't gone to save Clayton's struggling property development firm. A small portion, maybe $75,000, had paid down his most urgent business debts, the ones threatening immediate legal action. The rest had moved offshore with surgical precision. $425,000, transferred to an account that immediately purchased a luxury vacation villa near Lake Tahoe. Property title registered not under Clayton's name, but under a relative of Faye's maiden name family. From $425,000 to a villa, I whispered. Under Faye's family name, not Clayton's. Kirk's analysis continued in his precise attorney's language. This acquisition pattern suggests preparation for asset flight, not business rescue. Someone is building an exit strategy. I sat back in my chair and felt the whole conspiracy shift into clearer focus. Faye wasn't helping Clayton steal from me to save their family. She was using Clayton to steal from me to fund her own escape, a getaway property where she could disappear once the guardianship stripped me of everything, leaving Clayton holding the legal liability and the children with nothing. Shell companies are like false walls in a building. They look solid from the outside, but an engineer knows that if you trace the load paths, if you follow the structural logic backward, you'll always find they're not bearing any real weight, just redirecting it somewhere. The architect doesn't want you to look. I was still processing the villa purchase when Kirk's second email arrived at 2 that afternoon. The subject line, Medical Records Investigation Corruption Confirmed, Dr. Marcus Aldridge. The neurologist Faye had insisted I see monthly for the past 6 months starting in June. The doctor who'd asked careful questions about my memory, my daily routines, my ability to manage complex tasks. The appointments where Faye had sat beside me in the examination room, her hand occasionally touching my arm, in what I'd interpreted as supportive concern. According to Kirk's investigation, Dr. Aldridge owed $127,000 to Clayton's investment firm for a failed real estate speculation deal. The debt had been accumulating interest for 18 months, until November 15th, when it was mysteriously forgiven. Debt status paid in full through services rendered. I opened the attached medical file Kirk had obtained through legal channels, 6 monthly appointments. June through November 2023, each visit meticulously documented with clinical observations. A patient demonstrates significant memory impairment when questioned about recent events. Spouse reports increasing incidence of confusion and disorientation in familiar settings. Patient shows potential danger to self and others, particularly in managing household safety. Recommendation: patient incapable of managing complex financial affairs without supervision. I remembered those appointments. Every single one. Faye scheduling them, driving me there, sitting beside me in the small examination room with its antiseptic smell and framed diplomas on the wall. How many times had I sat in that neurologist's office believing Faye was being an attentive daughter-in-law, helping me navigate medical care in my grief, when she was actually sitting beside me like a screenwriter feeding lines to an actor crafting a fictional character called Walter Ward, dementia patient. One appointment at a time. Tell the doctor about last Tuesday, she'd say, and then describe an incident that never happened, me leaving the stove on, me forgetting Soren's name, Me getting lost, driving to the grocery store I'd been shopping at for 30 years. "Is that true, Mr. Ward?" Dr. Aldridge would ask. "No," I'd say. "I was fine. I didn't," but he would already be typing, recording her version. The official medical record documenting symptoms I didn't have, incidents that never occurred. A progressive decline that existed only in Faye's carefully constructed narrative and Dr. Aldridge's purchase testimony. 6 months, June through November. 24 weeks of systematic fraud building toward a medical file that could support an emergency guardianship petition, claiming I was a danger to myself and others. Kirk's email concluded with a timeline that made everything crystallize. June 2023. Monthly neurologist appointments begin. June 2023. Insurance form signatures, including loan authorization. November 15th. Dr. Aldridge's debt forgiven. November 20th. Final medical appointment documenting severe decline. November 25th. Apex Holdings LLC registered. December 1st, $600,000 wire transfer initiated. December 9th, the Vincent dies, convenient timing. December 13th, emergency guardianship hearing scheduled for December 21st, 8 days from now. I sat staring at that timeline and understood that the Lake Tahoe vacation, the hidden cameras, the forged loan, all of it was timed for this exact moment. Faye had spent half a year constructing a medical file claiming I was dangerous and incompetent. Clayton had armed the surveillance system to capture supposed evidence, and the guardianship hearing was scheduled for the week before Christmas, when courts rushed through emergency petitions and families were too distracted to scrutinize the details. But there was one piece still missing. If the cameras were meant to catch me having a breakdown, and the medical file claimed I was already declining, what specific triggering event were they waiting for to make their manufactured case irrefutable? What final piece of evidence did they need to complete the picture of an incompetent old man who couldn't be trusted with his own life? The moment I read through Dr. Aldridge's symptom list, dizziness, disorientation, unexplained memory lapses, episodes of confusion, the sickening realization hit me like a falling beam. These weren't lies. These were real symptoms I'd actually experienced, which meant the question wasn't whether they'd fabricated the evidence, but how they'd manufactured the medical reality itself. I walked to the bathroom and stared at the weekly pill organizer sitting on the counter beside the sink. 7 compartments labeled Monday through Sunday. Faye had filled it every Sunday evening for the past 6 months, her voice always cheerful as she handed it to me. "Just your blood pressure medication, Dad. Same as always. I want to make sure you stay on schedule." I opened Monday's compartment. 2 small white pills and 1 blue capsule. The same combination I'd been taking faithfully every morning, trusting my daughter-in-law to manage something Eleanor had always handled. But Saturday morning, before Clayton and Faye had arrived with their Lake Tahoe lie, I'd felt strange taking them. An instinct I couldn't name had made me pour that day's dose down the sink instead of swallowing, and Sunday morning, with the children already here and Faye gone, I'd skipped them again. 2 days without the pills. 2 days of my head feeling clearer than it had in months. I carefully extracted samples from each day's compartment, dropped them into separate plastic bags I labeled with the day of the week, and called Tom Garrison, a retired pharmacist, who'd worked the night shift at the hospital where Eleanor died, and had shared quiet conversations with me during those terrible final weeks. "Tom, it's Walter Ward. I need a favor, off the record, urgent." "What's going on, Walter?" "I need you to analyze some pills. Tell me what they actually are versus what they're supposed to be." The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats. "Bring them to my house. I'll run them through my old testing kit." An hour later, Tom called back. "Walter," he said, and his voice had gone cold. "These aren't blood pressure meds. 2 are benzodiazepines, mild sedatives. Long-term use causes exactly what you described when we talked memory issues, balance problems, confusion. Whoever's been giving you these has been chemically sedating you for months. I stood at my bathroom mirror looking at my own face, truly looking for the first time in months, without the chemical fog Faye had been feeding me, and saw not the confused, stumbling old man from the doctored videos, but a 71-year-old engineer whose hands had built structures designed to survive Category 5 hurricanes, and who sure as hell could survive one treacherous sun. Certucusicantha. I whispered to the pills still sitting in their weekly compartments. You drugged me for 6 months to make the symptoms real. Every stumble on the stairs I'd attributed to age. Every moment of disorientation I'd blamed on grief. Every misplaced key, every forgotten appointment, every instance where Faye had looked at me with practiced concern and said, "Are you feeling all right, Dad? You seem confused today." Not age, not grief. Chemical warfare disguised as care. But I stopped taking them Saturday morning, didn't I? I said to my reflection. And I can already see clearly again. I was still standing there, staring at the evidence of systematic poisoning, when Kirk's email arrived with the subject line, "Emergency Court Filing Discovered." I read it standing at my office desk, the afternoon light slanting through the window Eleanor had insisted on enlarging, because she loved watching the garden from this room. Emergency petition for guardianship, filed by Clayton Ward on behalf of Walter James Ward. Hearing date December 20th, 2023, 8 days from now. The petition claimed, "I frequently wanders from home without clear destination, fails to collect mail or pay utility bills resulting in service disruptions, and poses ongoing risk of self-harm through negligence and impaired judgment." Lies. All of it. But lies designed to explain why I'd never been properly served the legal notice, because if the court believed I was too impaired to manage my own affairs, they'd excuse the lack of formal service as a reasonable safety measure. Kirk's email continued. They filed last week while you were focused on Vincent's funeral. The timing was deliberate, maximum chaos, minimum defense preparation time. If the judge grants this order, Clayton immediately assumes complete control, residence, bank accounts, medical decisions, and legal authority to sell your home. My $1.9 million home. The house I'd built with my own hands. The property Eleanor and I had planned and saved for over 30 years of marriage. Every engineering project has a critical path. The sequence of tasks that must be completed on schedule or the entire project fails, and I had 8 days to execute the critical path that would save my home, my freedom, and my grandchildren's inheritance from the people who'd weaponized my grief and my trust. I pulled up a blank document and began typing. 8 days to construct my own truth, I said to the empty office. I've worked under worse conditions than this. Bridge construction had taught me to work under impossible deadlines, with lives depending on precision. 8 days was luxury compared to the 72-hour emergency repair I'd once engineered on a failing overpass during hurricane season. I typed faster. Evidence inventory. Hidden cameras, locations mapped. Signal repeater photographed. Edited video files backed up with timestamps. Forged loan documents copied. Power of attorney obtained through exploitation of grief dated and witnessed. Wire transfer trail to Lake Tahoe Villa bank records. Corrupt neurologists' falsified reports. Debt forgiveness documented. Sedatives substituted for prescribed medication pills. Secured pharmacist analysis confirmed. 6 months of conspiracy. 8 days to dismantle it. I sat at my desk with Kirk's court filing on one screen and the guardianship hearing countdown on the other 8 days, 192 hours, 11,520 minutes, and felt something I hadn't felt since Eleanor died, shift back into place inside my chest. Purpose. Order. A problem with a solution if you could just see it clearly enough. They'd spent 6 months building their case with drugged symptoms, falsified medical records, hidden cameras, and a theft disguised as legal authorization. But they'd made one catastrophic engineering error. They'd left their surveillance equipment operational. They'd documented their conspiracy in emails and wire transfers. And they'd fundamentally underestimated the structural integrity of the man they were trying to demolish. Now I had 8 days to use every piece of their own scheme against them. And the first step would be giving them exactly the performance they wanted on those hidden cameras, while building something in the blind spots they'd never see coming. At 10 Monday night, with both children finally asleep and the house settling into silence, I returned to Clayton's office and opened his laptop not to destroy what I'd find, but to understand the full blueprint of how my son had planned to destroy me. The laptop was still in sleep mode, logged into the home network Clayton had configured last month, when he'd claimed he needed to work remotely. The screen illuminated at my touch, showing a desktop cluttered with folders labeled by property development projects I recognized from his business. But in the system tray, a small red icon pulsed professional audio recording software running in the background. The most recent file was labeled Legal Consultation and dated last Wednesday, 2 days before they'd packed those orange snowboards and headed to Lake Tahoe. I plugged in the headphones Clayton had left draped over the monitor and pressed play. Clayton's voice filled my ears, tinny but clear, through the cheap earbuds. We need a specific triggering event. The medical records and edited clips are decent foundation, but if the judge orders an independent psychiatric evaluation, the whole timeline stalls and the fraud gets exposed. We need something undeniable that happens in real time. An unfamiliar voice, male professional, probably the lawyer, responded. What kind of triggering event are you suggesting? Something that shows clear danger, Clayton said. A breakdown on camera. An incident with the children that demonstrates he can't be trusted alone. Then Faye's voice cut in, and the coldness in her tone made my hands clench on the laptop edge. Vincent's funeral is perfect, she said. Dad will be exhausted, heartbroken, completely isolated. We just need to nudge him a little, leave him alone with the kids while he's at his worst. The cameras will do the rest. I stopped the recording and sat in the darkness of Clayton's office, feeling something crack and reform inside my chest. My brother Vincent had given everything to protect me first. His legs in 1983, then his final months gathering evidence I never received. And my son had calculated his death as tactical timing. I pressed play again. The lawyer's voice. And if he doesn't provide the triggering event you need, if he maintains control even while grieving. A pause. Then Faye again. Then we activate Plan B. What's Plan B? The lawyer asked. You don't need to know that, Clayton said quickly. Plan B won't be necessary. The sedatives will make sure of it. My finger hovered over the pause button, but Faye wasn't finished. We leave the kids with him, she said, her voice clinical and precise. He's grieving, weak, still taking the pills I've been giving him. If his drugged confusion causes him to snap at them, stumble and fall while carrying Marina, forget to feed Soren properly. If he accidentally hurts one of them while trying to care for them alone, the camera footage will be unassailable in court. What judge grants custody to a grandfather who can't even keep his grandchildren safe? The lawyer's voice held a note of hesitation. And if he maintains control despite everything, then we activate Plan B, Faye repeated. The recording ended. I sat in the chair my son had used to plan my destruction and removed the headphones with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let themselves. A parent's job is to build shelter around the vulnerable, to be the load-bearing wall that takes the stress so children can grow safely in the protected space. But Faye had inverted that entire architecture using my grandchildren as the stress itself, betting I would crack under the weight of caring for them while drugged and broken. Soren and Marina, 14 and 11 years old, left with me not because of babysitting convenience, but as living bait in a trap designed to either capture my breakdown or manufacture an accident that would hurt them. I stood and walked down the hallway to the guest bedroom where they slept. The door was open a crack, and dim light from the hallway nightlight fell across Marina's face as she breathed steadily in her sleep. Soren was in the twin bed beside hers, one arm flung over his eyes the way he always slept, innocent, unaware they'd been cast as unwitting actors in their parents' conspiracy. I stepped quietly into the room and adjusted Marina's blanket where it had slipped off her shoulder. She didn't wake, just made a small sound and shifted deeper into the pillow. "Whatever they planned for you," I whispered, barely audible even to myself, "it's not happening. I promise you that." Soren's breathing stayed deep and even. Marina's stuffed elephant had fallen to the floor. I picked it up and tucked it back beside her. They'd left these children with me, hoping I'd be too sedated, too grief-stricken, too exhausted to care for them properly. Hoping the cameras would catch me failing them in ways that could be twisted into evidence of danger. But I'd stopped taking the pills Saturday morning. The chemical fog was already lifting, and I knew exactly where every camera was pointed, exactly what angles they covered, exactly what blind spots existed in their carefully constructed surveillance grid. I could give them the performance they wanted. The struggling, confused grandfather stumbling through grief while making absolutely certain not one hair on these children's heads was at risk. I stood in the doorway, watching them sleep, and understood the final piece of Clayton and Faye's strategy. They'd left Soren and Marina with me not just as babysitting inconvenience, but as living tripwires. If I stumbled while carrying Marina down the stairs, if I forgot to feed Soren lunch while grief fogged and sedated, if exhaustion made me short-tempered, and the cameras caught me raising my voice, they'd have their triggering event. But they'd made one fatal miscalculation. I wasn't sedated anymore. I wasn't blind to their surveillance. And I had 8 days to build a counter case so solid that when I walked into that courtroom, their entire conspiracy would collapse under the weight of its own lies. Tomorrow morning, Vincent's funeral would happen without me. The cameras would watch me stumble through caring for 2 children while supposedly confused and impaired. Clayton and Faye would review the footage from Lake Tahoe looking for the breakdown they'd engineered, and I would give them exactly what they wanted to see while building their destruction in every blind spot between camera angles. Tuesday morning, I shuffled into the kitchen wearing yesterday's shirt inside out, squinting at the microwave clock like I'd never seen digital numbers before. The performance had begun. Soren was already at the table with a bowl of cereal, his dark eyes tracking my movements with the same careful attention he'd inherited from Eleanor. I had to make this convincing, not just for the cameras, but for him. If he suspected I was acting, he might say something that would tip off Clayton watching from Lake Tahoe. "Good morning, Grandpa," he said carefully. "Is it Wednesday already?" I asked, reaching for the coffee pot and then pausing as if I'd forgotten what I'd been reaching for. Where's Marina?" "Still asleep, and it's Tuesday, Grandpa." "Tuesday," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Right, Tuesday. Of course." I opened the refrigerator, stared inside for a long moment, then pulled out the milk, set it on the counter, opened the freezer, stood there looking at frozen vegetables like I'd never seen them before. "Grandpa, are you looking for something?" "My keys," I said. "I had them just a minute ago." Soren got up to help me search. The keys were in my pocket. I'd put them there deliberately, but I let him find them on top of the refrigerator where I'd placed them while he wasn't looking. "Here they are," he said gently. "Why don't you sit down? I can make you coffee." The shirt tag scratched against my neck. The metallic taste of adrenaline coated my tongue as I maintained the confused expression. This was exhausting in ways I hadn't anticipated, not the physical performance, but the emotional weight of deceiving a boy who was trying so hard to help. Marina appeared in the doorway an hour later, her hair still messy from sleep. She watched me drop an empty vitamin bottle on the floor and stare at it for 30 seconds before bending to pick it up. "Grandpa," she said quietly. "Are you feeling okay?" "Fine, sweetheart. Just fine." "What day is Uncle Vincent's funeral again?" The worry in her eyes was genuine, real, and I hated putting it there. "It's today," Soren said from behind me. "At 2 o'clock this afternoon. You told us yesterday, remember?" I blinked, slowly patted my pockets as if searching for something. Of course. Of course. I wrote it down somewhere." Marina and Soren exchanged a glance, exactly the kind of concerned look Clayton would be watching for on his camera feeds, exactly the evidence he needed to see. My 14-year-old grandson and 11-year-old granddaughter genuinely worried about their grandfather's mental state. The camera saw what they needed to see. What they didn't see was me watching their positioning in my peripheral vision, tracking which angles they covered, noting the blind spots I'd mapped the night before. My father taught me carpentry when I was 8. "Measure twice, cut once," he'd say. Clayton was measuring once. He wouldn't get a second cut. By noon, Marina had retreated to her room to get ready for the funeral. Soren was in the living room reading. I shuffled in, still maintaining my confused elderly persona, and steadied myself against the tall oak bookshelf I'd built 15 years ago. The one holding the complete works of Steinbeck on the top 3 shelves. Something felt wrong. The shelf tilted slightly under my hand. Just a fraction. But I'd built this bookcase with my own hands, had anchored it to the wall studs with 4 heavy-duty mounting screws designed to hold 600 pounds of oak and books. It shouldn't move at all. I froze, then carefully examined the base while pretending to search for a book on the lower shelf. 4 brass screws where they should be. But when I tested them with my fingernail while blocking the camera's view with my body, they turned easily, loosened, not removed entirely, but backed out enough that a hard bump would send the whole structure toppling forward. Plan B. My blood ran cold. This shelf stood exactly where Soren liked to sit on the floor, doing homework, his back against the base, completely unaware that 600 pounds of oak and hardcover books were held in place by 4 half-loosened screws. One hard shove and my grandson would be crushed. I didn't tighten the screws. Instead, I walked carefully back to my bedroom, retrieved the second micro camera I'd purchased, the one I'd hidden in my shaving kit, and returned to the living room. While maintaining my confused shuffle, I installed it in the heating vent 8 feet away, angled to capture a clear view of the bookshelf that Clayton's camera couldn't see. Then I called Soren into the room. "Can you help me find the atlas?" I asked, keeping my body between him and the dangerous shelf. "I think it's on the middle shelf, the safe side," I added quietly, guiding him to reach from the angle away from the tilt. He grabbed it, easily handed it to me. I thanked him and guided him back toward the kitchen, always keeping myself as the buffer between my grandson and the trap. Later, when Soren was in the bathroom, I examined the screws up close. The brass screw head caught afternoon light from the window. I could see the whorl pattern of a thumbprint pressed into metal dust. Smaller than mine. My son's thumb. My son, who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed. Not the careful fingerprints I'd left 15 years ago, when I'd installed these with gloves to avoid marring the brass finish. These were fresh, adult-sized, and the spacing between the ridges was narrower than my own prints. Clayton had always had smaller hands than me. He'd climbed a ladder in my house, reached behind this bookshelf, loosened 4 screws just enough, and positioned a death trap exactly where his own son liked to sit and study. I straightened up, my engineer's hands steady despite everything, and walked back to my hidden camera, Clayton's surveillance could only see the tail end of the bookshelf, suspicious movement maybe, but no clear view of what I was examining. My camera had captured everything. The funeral came and went without me. I stayed home with the children, maintained my performance, and waited. That evening, after Soren went to charge his smartwatch in his bedroom, and Marina left her old phone on the kitchen counter, the one she thought was broken, but I knew still powered on, I checked the time. Clayton would be back from clearing his head in 15 minutes. 15 minutes to discover what Vincent might have left behind, what evidence my brother had gathered before he died, what final gift he'd tried to give me at the funeral I'd been prevented from attending. I picked up Marina's phone with hands that had built bridges and houses, and now held the weight of my grandchildren's future. Marina's old phone powered on with a soft chime, the cracked screen glowing pale blue in the dim kitchen. The 15 minutes before Clayton's return had already started counting down. Grandpa, Mom said keep it safe. Marina had told me earlier that evening, handing me the device she thought was broken. But it doesn't work anymore. It worked fine. The screen was cracked, the SIM card removed, but when I pressed the power button, it came to life immediately. No password, no security, just a home screen filled with apps an 11-year-old girl would use: games, photo filters, a drawing program, and a voice memos folder with 47 recordings. I sat at the kitchen table and pressed play on the first one, dated 6 months ago. June. Right when the monthly neurologist appointments had started. Right when Faye had begun filling my weekly pill organizer with sedatives instead of blood pressure medication. Faye's voice came through the tiny speaker, warm and encouraging in the way only a practiced liar's voice can be. "So, okay, sweetie, let's practice one more time. When the doctor asks if Grandpa ever gets confused, what do you say?" Marina's small voice, trusting and dutiful. I say yes. Good. "And what example do you give? That he forgot the stove on." She's perfect. "But say it like this. Grandpa forgot the stove on, and it scared me." "Can you say it exactly like that?" "Grandpa forgot the stove on, and it scared me." Beautiful. "Now when he asks if Grandpa ever yells, what do you say?" I pressed pause. My hands were shaking. I made them stop. The next recording was similar. And the next. Faye coaching her 11-year-old daughter to rehearse false statements about me. Teaching her the exact phrases to use. Making her practice tone and delivery like lines in a school play. Say Grandpa yells when he's tired. Say you feel scared sometimes. You say he forgets to make you lunch. Lies. Every single one. Rehearsed with the same patient repetition a piano teacher might use to teach scales. I scrolled through the recordings. 47 coaching sessions. 6 months of systematic manipulation, building a fictional narrative in my granddaughter's voice that would sound spontaneous and genuine when delivered to Dr. Aldridge's debt-compromised ears. She rehearsed lies the way other children rehearse piano scales, dutiful, trusting, unaware she was being weaponized against the man who built her dollhouse. I saved the recordings to my laptop. Returned the phone to exactly where Marina had left it on the counter, and walked upstairs to check on her. She was asleep, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, her face peaceful and innocent. "Sleep tight, little dragon," I whispered, adjusting her blanket. "Grandpa's got everything safe now." Downstairs, I had 7 minutes left before Clayton's return. But Soren was still awake in the living room, and he'd been eager to show me something earlier. "Grandpa," he called when he saw me. "I want to show you my detective game." He held up his smartwatch, the one Clayton had given him for his 14th birthday last month. The screen showed a list of audio files with timestamps and location data. Before I tell you what Soren's smartwatch recording captured that Saturday morning. Are you still with me? Comment A if you think Clayton planned this alone, or B if Faye was really the architect. Please note what follows contains some fictionalized details added for narrative impact. But the message about betrayal is what stays with you. It's like being a spy. Soren explained, his eyes bright with pride. I can record ambient audio wherever I go. Listen to this one, that's the playground at school. And this one is traffic on Broad Street. And this one, he scrolled to a file dated Saturday morning, December 9th. The day Clayton and Faye had arrived with their Lake Tahoe lie and their suitcases full of orange snowboards. This one is from Mom and Dad's car, Soren said. I was recording to see if I could catch bird sounds, but listen, you can hear them talking. He pressed play. The audio quality was surprisingly clear. Road noise. The hum of tires. Then Clayton's voice, unmistakable, and close to where Soren must have been sitting in the back seat. If the old man takes one more fall, doctor signs off. After that, the house is ours. Faye's response was quieter but audible. Keep your voice down. The kids, they have headphones on. Relax. My son's voice, 9 words, a confession. Soren was looking at me with proud expectation, waiting for me to praise his detective skills. I forced my face into a calm smile, reached out and patted his head. Finest detective I know, Soren. I said, my voice steady despite everything. You keep this watch charged and safe, understand? These recordings are important. Really? His face lit up. I have tons more. Want to hear the one from the grocery store? Tomorrow, I said. Right now it's bedtime. Go brush your teeth. He bounded up the stairs, the smartwatch still on his wrist, completely unaware that he'd just handed me the most damning piece of evidence in the entire conspiracy. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and created a new folder, legal defense package. Inside went copies of Marina's coaching recordings, screenshots of the wire transfer trail Kirk had uncovered, Tom Garrison's pill analysis, Roy Brennan's camera system documentation, the edited video files with their manipulated timestamps, Dr. Aldridge's debt forgiveness records, and now extracted from Soren's smartwatch and saved in 3 separate backup locations, my son's voice clearly stating his intent to steal my house. Upstairs, a door opened. Clayton's bedroom. His footsteps moved across the hall, then paused at the top of the stairs. The house was too quiet. Or maybe too loud. Maybe he'd noticed the laptop still glowing in the kitchen when it should have been put away. Maybe he'd seen something out of place in his office. Maybe he'd checked the camera feeds and noticed me moving with too much purpose. Too much clarity for someone supposedly confused and sedated. The footsteps stayed frozen at the top of the stairs. I kept typing, my fingers steady on the keyboard, cataloging evidence with the same methodical precision I'd once used to document failures during bridge inspections. The hunter had just realized the prey was no longer running. Clayton's footsteps stayed frozen at the top of the stairs for 10 seconds that felt like minutes. Then they retreated. Back to his bedroom. Door closing softly. He'd noticed something. Maybe not everything, but enough to make him uncertain. Enough to make him wait. I saved the legal defense package folder to 3 separate cloud backups and closed the laptop. The evidence was secure. But there was one more place I needed to look, a place I'd been avoiding for 3 years. The bedroom closet floor safe hadn't been opened since the morning after Eleanor's funeral, when I'd placed her wedding ring inside, and couldn't bear to look at it again. I knelt on the closet floor now, my knees protesting the position, and entered the combination with fingers that remembered the sequence even after all this time. The heavy door swung open with a soft click. Eleanor's ring sat in a small velvet box, exactly where I'd left it. Beside it, a handwritten envelope I didn't remember putting there. My name in Eleanor's careful script. And underneath, in smaller letters, for you when you need it. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was dated 4 months before she died. Written in the clear, methodical handwriting she'd maintained, even as the cancer weakened everything else. Walter, it began. If you're reading this, something has happened that I hoped you'd never have to face. I saw him 3 weeks ago, photographing our property deed when he thought I was napping. I saw him asking my hospice nurse questions about incapacitation procedures, about what happens to assets when someone can't make decisions anymore. He thought he was being clever. He thought I was too sick to notice. I pressed the letter against my chest, feeling paper that her hands had touched words she'd written while dying. So I called Kirk. The letter continued. Changed everything. The house is protected now, restructured the entire estate into an irrevocable trust 4 years ago, before I got sick, before Clayton could make his move. You have lifetime residency, but you don't own it anymore. The trust does. Soren and Marina are the beneficiaries. Our grandchildren, Walter, not our son. The letters blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. If Clayton tries to take this house from you, don't assume it's his first attempt. And don't face him alone. See, our lawyer Kirk knows everything. I made sure of it. I love you. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you fight. But I built you armor before I left. Use it. I sat on the closet floor, holding Eleanor's letter, and felt her presence for the first time in 3 years. Not the hollow absence of grief, but the solid weight of protection she'd built before leaving me. My wife saw the predator while I was still building birdhouses with my son. I pulled out my phone and called Kirk. It was past 10 at night, but he answered immediately. I found Eleanor's letter, I said. A pause. Then you know. Tell me the rest. Kirk's sigh came through the speaker. Eleanor came to me 4 years ago. Not 3 when she got diagnosed. 4. She said Clayton was asking questions he shouldn't ask about estate law, about guardianships, about what happens to property when someone dies without a will. She didn't tell you because she didn't want you to think badly of your son based on questions that might be innocent. But she also didn't take chances. The irrevocable trust, I said. Established 4 years ago, Kirk confirmed. The house isn't yours anymore, Walter. It belongs to the trust. You have guaranteed lifetime residency. No one can remove you ever. But you can't sell it. You can't mortgage it. And most importantly, even with a guardianship order, Clayton can't touch it. Because you don't own it. The trust does. And I'm the successor trustee as of Vincent's death. I leaned against the closet wall, Eleanor's letter still in my hand. The Clayton's working from outdated property records, Kirk continued. Everything he's built his case on assumes you still have full ownership. He doesn't know Eleanor changed the structure before she died. His entire plan, the loan, the guardianship, selling the house to fund whatever escape he and Faye are planning, it's all built on a foundation that doesn't exist. She knew, I whispered. 4 years ago, she already knew. She knew something was wrong. And she protected you before you even realized you needed protection. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Kirk's voice changed, became harder. Walter, there's something else. I've been going through Vincent's email server, the backup he kept, that Clayton couldn't access. I found a deleted message from 2 weeks before Vincent died. What kind of message? Vincent warning Clayton about suspicious financial transfers. Your brother had been monitoring Clayton's business accounts because you'd mentioned some concerns. He found the shell companies traced some of the wire transfers. And 3 days before he died, Vincent emailed me directly. Make sure Walter gets the files at my funeral. I won't be around much longer, and he needs to see what his son has been doing. The closet suddenly felt too small. Clayton didn't keep you away from that funeral out of spite, Kirk said quietly. He kept you away to intercept what Vincent had gathered. Your brother died trying to protect you, Walter. Just like he did 40 years ago on that bridge. 40 years ago, Vincent's broken legs bought me a future. 2 months ago, his silence bought me time to fight back. He broke his legs for me once. I said, my voice rough. This time he gave everything. Now, and he made sure I had backup copies of everything he found, Kirk said. Clayton deleted the email from your inbox, but he couldn't delete it from Vincent's server, and he couldn't delete the files Vincent sent me with instructions to hand them over at the funeral. Instructions you never received because you weren't there. Send me everything, I said. Already done. Check your email. I ended the call and sat in the closet holding Eleanor's letter, understanding everything that had been built to protect me by people who'd seen the danger before I could. My brother broke his legs to save me in 1983. Before dying, he spent his final months keeping my life intact. I owe him twice. I set my alarm for 6 in the morning. The guardianship hearing started at 9. Clayton thought he was walking into a formality with a confused old man who could barely remember what day it was. Tomorrow morning, he would discover what Eleanor and Vincent had built while he was sharpening knives. I dial Calvin Chandler at 6:47 a.m. Wednesday morning, standing on the back porch where Clayton's cameras can't pick up audio through the double-paned glass. He answers on the second ring. Walter, but everything all right with the kids? The children are fine physically, but I need you and Constance here by 8:30. Don't call first. Don't text Clayton. Just come to the side entrance, the kitchen door. Silence stretches for 3 seconds. Calvin Chandler spent 40 years as a federal auditor. He understands the weight of careful words. We'll be there, he says. I end the call and watch December frost melt off the porch railing. Inside, Soren's alarm goes off upstairs 7 a.m., same as every school day. Normal morning sounds in a house that's been anything but normal since Saturday. Calvin and Constance arrive at 8:33 a.m. I lead them straight through to the dining room without explanation. Constance's face shows the tight worry of a grandmother who's watched her daughter marry poorly and spent 14 years hoping things would improve. Why the dining room? Calvin asks. I point to the corner where the decorative beam creates a blind spot from Clayton's cameras. Because my son is very thorough about surveillance, but he didn't account for the structural modifications Eleanor and I made in 2009. I pulled 2 accordion folders from the sideboard and set them on the table. Everything I show you exists in multiple secure locations. Copies are with my attorney, my financial advisor, and a safe deposit box Clayton doesn't know about. Constance sits down slowly. What did he do? He forged my signature on a $600,000 home equity line of credit back in June. He wired the money to offshore accounts and a Lake Tahoe property 3 weeks ago while gaslighting me about my mental capacity. I slide the first folder toward Calvin. His jaw tightens with each page, the HELOC documents, the signature analysis, the bank statements showing systematic theft. That's embezzlement, he says quietly. Then that's the foundation charge. It gets worse. I show them the hidden camera screenshots, Clayton and Faye's conversations about having me declared incompetent, the attorney consultations about memory care facilities, the text messages about liquidating the house. Constance makes a small wounded sound. Faye was part of this. Faye orchestrated this. I open the second folder and show them the Lake Tahoe villa deed, registered solely in Faye's name, purchased with my stolen money. She's been planning an exit strategy that doesn't include Clayton. She has a fake passport arranged for herself only. He thinks they're building a future together. He doesn't know she's already gone. Calvin looks up with the expression of a man watching arithmetic reveal fraud. Why are you showing us this? So because Soren and Marina need to be somewhere safe when this detonates. Clayton has a court hearing this morning. He doesn't know I'm not attending, that I've filed criminal charges, that investigators froze his accounts at 7:00 a.m. today. When he comes back here, he'll be dangerous. You want us to take the children? Constance says. I meet her eyes. She's a small woman, barely 5'3", but she raised 2 daughters through military deployments and 3 recessions. She has steel in her spine. I want you to pick them up from school at normal dismissal and take them to your house for the week. I've prepared a notarized temporary guardianship letter. When Clayton calls asking where they are, You tell him they're safe, and he can see them when the legal situation is resolved. He won't accept that, Calvin says. He doesn't have a choice. I'm their legal guardian through the trust structure Vincent and I established. Clayton has custodial access, not authority. That access is now suspended due to ongoing criminal investigation. Upstairs, Marina's door opens and her small feet pad toward the bathroom. Normal Wednesday morning. She has no idea that by tonight her world will be different. Calvin carefully returns the documents to their folders. You've been planning this for days. Since Saturday afternoon, when I found the first camera in my bedroom lamp. I slide a sealed envelopes across the table. This is the temporary guardianship authorization effective immediately. There's also a letter for Soren and Marina, age-appropriate explanations. Don't let them see the news coverage until we talk. Constance takes the envelope with shaking hands. Does Clayton know you know? He suspects I've found something. He doesn't know the scope. He doesn't know about Kirk Frost or the criminal charges or the account freezes. He thinks his cameras and his wife give him complete control. I stand and move toward the doorway where camera coverage resumes. Pick them up at 3:15 p.m. Normal carpool routine. I'll text the school to add you to the approved list. Calvin and Constance exchange a look that holds 43 years of marriage and shared crisis management. He nods once. We'll have them, Calvin says. And Walter, what happens to you when Clayton comes back? I've survived worse than an angry son. I walk them to the kitchen door at 9:04 a.m. Through the window, I watch their car disappear around the corner onto Maple Street. The house feels very quiet, just the refrigerator's hum, and Marina singing off-key in her bedroom while she gets dressed. By 3:30 p.m., she'll be at her grandparents' house eating snacks and asking why Grandpa Calvin picked them up early. By 5 p.m., Clayton will receive the call from his attorney explaining why the hearing was postponed and why federal investigators are requesting his cooperation. By 6 p.m., he'll be standing in this kitchen demanding answers I won't give him. I pour my third cup of coffee and sit at the kitchen table where the camera above the refrigerator has a perfect view. Let Clayton watch the footage later and see nothing but his elderly father drinking coffee on a Wednesday morning, calm and alone, waiting for the world to end. Calvin Chandler calls me at 4:15 Wednesday afternoon, 45 minutes, after he and Constance have driven the children safely to their house across the city. They're settled, he says. Marina asked for hot chocolate. Soren found the chessboard in the guest room and wants to play tonight. They're okay, Walter. I let out a breath I've been holding since noon. Thank you. A pause on the line. Then Calvin's voice shifts, the federal auditor coming forward, replacing the grandfather. Walter, when Faye calls, and she will call, what do I tell her? Tell her the children are safe and will remain so until the legal situation is resolved. Don't elaborate. Don't argue. Let her say whatever she needs to say and then end the call. And if she threatens legal action, custody demand, she won't. Not after tonight. Another pause. I hear Constance in the background, the sound of a kettle, the ordinary noise of a home where children are safe. Calvin drops his voice. Is there something you're not telling me about Faye specifically? I had planned to wait. To let the federal proceedings handle the disclosure. But Calvin Chandler is a man who spent 40 years auditing financial fraud, and he has a right to understand why his daughter will not be coming home. Can you come back tonight? I ask. Alone. After the children are asleep. There's something you need to see before this becomes public. He arrives at 9:15. I lead him directly to the dining room, Eleanor's decorative beam creating the same blind spot from Clayton's cameras that I'd used this morning. This time I set only one folder on the table. The Lake Tahoe Villa documents, the offshore account records, and last, the passport correspondence. Calvin sits very still as he reads. He's a man who has looked at fraudulent numbers for 4 decades without flinching. But his hands tighten on the pages when he reaches the final email. Single adult female. No dependents. No additional passengers. He sets the paper down carefully. She was leaving Soren and Marina? Yes. Not just you and Clayton, her own children. The account would have funded her indefinitely. Clayton doesn't know. He believes the villa is their shared exit plan. Calvin stares at the document for a long moment. Outside, a car passes on the street, headlights sweeping briefly across the dining room wall. How long have you known this? He asks. Since Monday. Kirk's financial analysis confirmed the Passport Commission Tuesday morning. He nods slowly. The nod of a man filing facts into categories he already understands. Fraud, betrayal, exit strategy. These are not abstract concepts to Calvin Chandler. What happens to her now? He asks. Federal investigators froze all accounts this morning. Clayton will discover that when he arrives home tonight. Faye will discover the passport was flagged by the same investigators an hour ago. The document forger in Reno is cooperating with prosecutors. There is no exit. Calvin closes the folder and pushes it back across the table toward me. Does Constance need to know tonight? Stu, that's your decision. What I need you to know is that those children cannot go back to either of their parents. And the temporary guardianship authorization I gave you this morning is solid through end of January. Kirk will file for permanent transfer by end of the week. He stands, takes his coat from the back of the chair. At the dining room doorway, he pauses with the posture of a man who has just revised his understanding of someone he raised. I'm sorry, he says, for what my daughter did to your family. Your daughter's choices aren't yours to carry, I say. What matters now is that Soren and Marina have people on both sides who will stand firm for them. He leaves through the kitchen door at 9:40. I watch his taillights disappear around the corner onto Maple Street, the same corner Clayton's car will turn from in approximately 90 minutes. I walk back to the living room and sit in the armchair directly in view of all 3 cameras. Clayton is coming home to a house where his accounts are frozen. His surveillance system has been turned against him, and his father is sitting calmly in the dark, waiting for him. I open my book, turn a page I don't read. Let the cameras watch an old man at rest. I am not at rest, but they don't need to know that yet. I sit in the armchair for 27 minutes, after the children leave, watching dust particles drift through afternoon light while the camera watches me. Then I walk to the kitchen and make a fresh pot of coffee. The trap is already set. At 2:00 p.m. I had sent Clayton a single text. I did something terrible. One of the kids fell and won't wake up. Come home immediately. I had powered the phone off immediately after. By now, wherever he has seen it. Kirk and Mitchell Graham are behind the bookcase. The microphones are live. The recording is running to secure cloud storage. All that remains is to wait. The message goes to Clayton's cell phone, the one he checks obsessively between meetings, the one connected to his camera monitoring app, the one that will make him abandon whatever he's doing and race home in a panic. The delivered notification appears. I power the phone off completely and set it face down on the counter. The kitchen clock reads 2:02 p.m. Clayton will be here by 6, at the latest, probably earlier, if traffic cooperates. That gives me 4 hours. I walk to the landline, the beige wall-mounted phone Eleanor insisted we keep in case of emergencies, and dial Kirk Frost's direct number. I sent the message, I say when he answers. He'll be here by 6. Time to finish this. FBI has had warrants ready for several days, Kirk says. His voice carries the careful calm of a lawyer who's coordinated federal operations before. We move at 5. Mitchell Graham and I will arrive together. He'll need 45 minutes to position equipment. You're certain about the location? The hidden room behind the living room bookcase. Eleanor and I built it in 2008 to store architectural blueprints and her rare book collection. Soundproofed walls, ventilation system, door mechanism hidden in the frame. Clayton's never known it exists. Perfect. Federal surveillance unit has Clayton's vehicle tagged. They'll notify us when he starts driving your direction. Once he admits to fraud, elder abuse, or conspiracy on tape, we have jurisdiction. They'll enter within minutes. I hang up and look at the clock again. 22:09 p.m. 4 hours until my son walks through that door, believing his child is dying. 4 hours to weaponize his own cruelty. I spend the time preparing. I move Eleanor's favorite reading chair from the guest room into the living room, positioning it where Clayton will see it immediately when he enters the chair she sat in during her last months, the one he helped me carry to Goodwill 3 weeks after the funeral, because keeping it around isn't healthy, Dad. I retrieved it from the donation center the day after I found the first hidden camera. I set out Marina's inhaler on the coffee table, the one she hasn't needed in 2 years, since her asthma improved. I place one of Soren's sneakers on the stairs, laces untied as if kicked off in haste. Every detail carefully staged, every object a silent accusation. At 4:47 p.m. I hear tires on the driveway. Kirk's silver Lexus pulls up, followed by a dark blue sedan. 2 men get out. Kirk carries his leather briefcase. The second man, tall 50s, gray temples, and the watchful posture of someone who spent decades in law enforcement, carries 2 equipment cases. I meet them at the side door. Mitchell Graham, the investigator says, extending his hand. His grip is firm, professional. Former Philadelphia Police Fraud and Elder Abuse Division. Retired 5 years ago, now private practice. Kirk briefed me on the situation. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I appreciate you coming. I've worked 32 cases like this, Graham says, following me inside. Adult children exploiting aging parents. It never stops being ugly. I lead them to the living room and trigger the hidden door mechanism, a specific sequence of pressure points on the bookcase frame that Eleanor and I designed together. The bookcase swings open silently on counterweighted hinges, revealing the narrow room behind it. 12 feet long, 6 feet wide. Floor-to-ceiling shelves hold Eleanor's first edition Dickens collection, my architectural rendering tubes photograph albums from 43 years of marriage. A small desk sits in the corner where she used to catalog her acquisitions. Now Graham sets his cases on that desk and opens them. Audio is live, he says, pulling out 3 wireless microphones no larger than coat buttons. 3 mics positioned living room, kitchen, hallway. You'll hear everything from in here through these headsets. Transmission encrypted recording to secure cloud storage with timestamp authentication. Pennsylvania requires all-party consent for wiretapping. But you're the property owner, you're a named target of an ongoing criminal conspiracy, and federal elder abuse statutes supersede state wiretapping law when the recorded party is actively committing fraud against a vulnerable adult on the recording party's own premises. Everything captured tonight is legally admissible. Kirk's already confirmed it with the U.S. Attorney's Office. He moves through the house with efficient precision, placing microphones in locations I point out behind the picture frame near the living room entrance, inside the kitchen vent hood, beneath the hallway console table. Each one invisible unless you know exactly where to look. Kirk watches from the hidden room doorway, phone in hand, waiting for the signal from the surveillance unit outside. They're staging 2 blocks away. Graham returns and tests each microphone. His voice comes through the headset, crystal clear. Testing living room audio. Can you hear this? I nod. Kitchen mic, check. Another nod. Hallway position. Final check. Every blueprint I ever drafted was about shelter. This is the first one designed to collapse. Graham sits at the small desk and pulls up monitoring software on his tablet. 3 waveform displays show ambient house sounds, refrigerator hum, furnace clicking, the old floorboards settling. Kirk stands beside him, briefcase open and legal documents arranged in precise stacks. I look around the room. Eleanor's books, my blueprints, photographs of family vacations and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. This space was meant to preserve our best moments. Now it's a bunker for exposing our worst. Mr. Walter, Kirk says quietly, you built this house to protect your family. Tonight it will do exactly that. At 5:50 p.m., Graham gives a thumbs up. All recording equipment live and tested. Kirk checks his phone. FBI surveillance unit confirms Clayton's car left downtown 20 minutes ago, heading this way. I take my position in the living room armchair, the same one I sat in earlier. The one facing the hidden camera Clayton thinks is still watching a confused old man. Kirk and Graham slip behind the bookcase. The counterweighted door swings closed with the faint whisper of hinges, and the bookcase locks seamlessly back into place. The house goes silent. I wait for my son to come home. The minutes stretch. Through the hidden room wall, I hear Kirk's quiet breathing in my earpiece and the faint electronic hum of Graham's recording equipment. The house waits with me. The front door crashes open at 6:12 p.m., and Clayton's voice cuts through the dark house. Dad! Where are the kids? Footsteps rapid across the hardwood. 2 sets. Faye flips the light switch, and they both freeze when they see me sitting motionless in the armchair. They're wearing business suits, carrying briefcases, performing the choreography of people just returned from important meetings. Why are you sitting in the dark? Faye asks, voice pitched with practiced concern. Where are the children? Are you all right? Clayton sets his briefcase down, carefully moves closer. Dad, you look exhausted. We're so worried. What happened? Your text said. I look up at my son and his wife standing in Eleanor's living room under lights they turned on like they own this house. I let a small smile touch my lips. How is Lake Tahoe? I ask. Clayton's briefcase slips from his grip. It hits the floor at an angle, latch popping open, contents spilling across the hardwood. Ski resort brochures. Heavenly Village restaurant receipts. Charter flight booking confirmation for Reno Tahoe International Airport. A rental car agreement with Lake Tahoe in the location field. Faye goes pale. Clayton stares at the scattered papers like they're evidence at a crime scene, which technically they are. Clayton's voice cracks. We were in New York. Business meetings. You're confused again. The children are safe, I say. They're with their maternal grandparents under temporary guardianship authorization. They won't be coming back here. Neither will you. I reach to the side table and pick up the first folder. This is location tracking data from your cell phone. You weren't in New York on Monday. You were at a luxury villa at 2847 Lakeshore Boulevard, South Lake Tahoe, California. The property purchased with money stolen from the home equity line you opened in my name. I set the document on the coffee table. Clayton doesn't move to pick it up. This is the lab analysis of the prescription medication you substituted. Sedatives mixed with mild hallucinogens to create confusion episodes. Documented dosages calculated to impair cognitive function without triggering emergency medical intervention. Another folder on the table. This is audio from Soren's smartwatch. 47 minutes of you and Faye coaching the children on what to say to social workers, how to describe my forgetfulness, which stories would sound most concerning to family court evaluators. Faye makes a small sound. I ignore it. This is Marina's old phone, the one you gave her for the coaching sessions. Every script saved in the Notes app. Faye's handwriting, Marina's voice recordings practicing the lines. I'm placing evidence like load-bearing beams, each one measured, each one necessary, watching the structure realize it can't hold its own weight. And this, I say, pulling the final printed email from the folder, is the communication between your wife and a document forger in Reno. Read the subject line, Clayton. Read it out loud. He picks up the paper with shaking hands. New identity arranged just me. Keep reading. The recipient specifications. His voice drops to a whisper. Single adult female. No dependents. No additional passengers. He looks up at Faye. She takes a step backward. The passport was just for you. Clayton's voice climbs. The villa's in your name only. The escape plan you were leaving all of us. Oh, don't you dare! Faye says, voice going sharp and desperate. This was all your idea. You planned everything. I just followed your instructions. Joe, my instructions. Clayton's briefcase papers crunch under his feet as he moves toward her. You signed every paper. You installed the cameras. You loosened the bookshelf screws that almost killed your own father-in-law. Don't you dare pretend innocence. You drugged him, Faye shouts back. You switched his medications. I never touched those pills. They're screaming at each other now, throwing accusations like weapons, each trying to position themselves as the lesser criminal. My son built cameras to watch me fall. Instead, they're recording him beg. 10 minutes of confession. 10 minutes of mutual incrimination. Every word captured by Clayton's own surveillance system in crystal-clear audio and high-definition video. Faye suddenly stops mid-sentence, eyes going wide. The cameras. The server. She runs for the basement stairs. I hear her footsteps pounding down, then a cry of rage. She returns, holding the empty server housing, just a metal shell. No hard drives, no data storage, nothing but mounting brackets and disconnected cables. While looking for this, I ask. Your recordings were mirrored to an off-site secure server 48 hours ago. Every camera feed, every audio file, every piece of surveillance you collected to prove my incompetence. All preserved as evidence of conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. The front door opens. Agent Rachel Morrison enters first, mid-40s FBI credentials, held high, 15-year veteran with the bearing of someone who's handled family exploitation cases too many times to be surprised by human cruelty anymore. 3 federal officers follow behind her. Clayton Ward, Faye Ward. Morrison says, voice steady and official. You're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, financial fraud, and attempted murder. The bookcase swings open. Kirk Frost steps out from the hidden room, briefcase in hand, looking at Clayton with the professional disappointment of a lawyer who's seen a man destroy himself. Clayton stares at the hidden room, at Kirk, at the cameras still recording from their concealed positions. You turned my own system against me. You built a trap, I say quietly. I just changed who it was for. Miranda rights read in sterile legal language. Handcuffs clicking into place. Clayton and Faye led towards separate vehicles, no longer touching, no longer allied, no longer anything but 2 criminals who thought they could exploit an old man and walk away rich. Through the living room window, I watch Clayton turn back. For 3 seconds, our eyes meet across 45 years carpentry lessons in this garage, Little League games, where I cheered from aluminum bleachers, Christmas mornings, around the tree. Eleanor decorated the space where Trust used to live before he decided my life was worth less than my house. The car door closes. The taillights disappear down Maple Street. Kirk stands beside me at the window. It's done. I nod. Justice is done. But the house is still full of ghosts. I stand at the window long after the federal vehicles disappear, until Kirk's hand on my shoulder pulls me back. He opens his briefcase on the coffee table, still covered with evidence folders, then positions Clayton and Faye handcuffed silent on the sofa, where they once sat pretending to be a loving family. Before we transport them, Kirk says, there are legal matters that need to be stated on record. He holds the trust document so both of them can see it clearly. The power of attorney you used to execute the home equity line of credit. Clayton, the one you claimed gave you legal authority, was revoked 4 years before Eleanor's death. The entire loan was void from inception. Clayton's head snaps up. That's impossible. You had an outdated copy. Eleanor revoked it the same day she restructured the estate. The bank never verified current status, which is why they're now facing their own federal investigation. Kirk turns a page. Trust Clause 7b states that any beneficiary who attempts to encumber or dispose of trust property without written consent shall immediately and irrevocably forfeit all rights and interest in the trust estate. You triggered that clause, Clayton. Everything goes to Soren and Marina. I watch my son's face as the full weight settles, not just criminal charges, not just prison time, but complete financial annihilation. Every dollar he thought he was stealing was never his to begin with. Clayton meets my eyes across Eleanor's living room, across 45 years of father and son, across the wreckage of everything that used to be family. He searches my face for something, regret, forgiveness, explanation. No words come from either of us. At the threshold, he glances back one final time. 2 seconds. Then he's gone. 3 weeks pass in courtrooms I never enter. Kirk handles everything, calling with updates that sound like legal abstracts from someone else's life. Clayton accepts a federal plea agreement 7 to 9 years for bank fraud and financial exploitation of an elderly person, permanent forfeiture of his contractor licenses, and no contact with me for the duration of his sentence, plus 5 years supervised release. Faye cooperates with prosecutors in exchange for 3 to 5 years, under a separate agreement, though federal investigators had already frozen the offshore accounts before she could access them. The corrupt doctor loses his medical license. Investigators uncover 12 other elderly patients he had similarly targeted. The attorney who advised the guardianship scheme surrenders his law license and faces conspiracy charges. The bank voids the fraudulent HELOC and formally corrects my credit report. A federal court order nullifies the $600,000 loan, entirely restoring my property title to completely clean status. No liens, no encumbrances, no evidence Clayton ever touched it. Kirk brings the final paperwork on December 30th, spreading documents across my kitchen table. Property deed trust records, court nullification order bearing an official seal and a judge's signature. The HELOC is nullified, he says. Title is completely clean. Clean, I repeat. Yes, that's the word. He tells me Soren and Marina are still with the Chandlers, that permanent custody should transfer to me by mid-February, that they ask about me. I nod but don't trust my voice. Kirk closes his briefcase. You won, Walter. Complete victory, criminal conviction, financial restoration, family protection. Yes, do I say? Everything. He drives away at 4:17 p.m. I sit alone at the kitchen table with a folder containing every piece of evidence that justice was served. On the refrigerator held by a Liberty Bell magnet is the phone number for Calvin and Constance Chandler's house, where Soren and Marina have been living for 3 weeks. I haven't called. I don't know what winning is supposed to sound like to children who just lost both parents because their grandfather turned them in. Outside December, darkness settles over Philadelphia. Inside the house sits clean and quiet and legally pristine. The price was immeasurable. I wake on New Year's Eve morning staring at the phone number on the refrigerator. 22 hours since Kirk left. I still haven't called. Instead, I drive to the corner store and buy Vincent's favorite dark ale, the imported stuff he used to bring to Sunday dinners. The one Eleanor complained was too expensive for casual drinking. The clerk raises an eyebrow at the single-bottle purchase but doesn't comment. I drive to Laurel Hill Cemetery through December mist, that turns the headstones into gray sentinels rising from white ground. Vincent's grave sits on a gentle slope under a bare oak tree, third row from the eastern fence. The headstone is simple granite with his name dates and the word brother that I requested, because it was the truest thing I could say about him. I sit on damp grass beside the marker. The cold seeps through my coat, but I don't move. Winter birds call from nearby trees. The city sounds distant and muffled. I'm sorry I missed the funeral, I say to the stone. Clayton made sure I never got the notification, never got your evidence envelope, either the one you tried to give me at the service. Kirk found it 3 weeks ago in Clayton's office desk, still sealed. You knew what he was doing. You were trying to warn me. The grass is wet. The stone is cold. My brother has been gone 2 months, and I'm telling him things he'll never hear. Eleanor saw it 4 years early. I continue. She revised the trust, revoked Clayton's power of attorney, built-in protection clauses I didn't understand until last week. You saw it 2 months early, gathered bank statements, photographed documents, compiled everything I needed. I was the last one to understand. 71 years old, and still the slowest one in the family. I open the ale bottle. The cap makes a soft hiss. Clayton and Faye are in federal custody. 7 to 9 years for him, 3 to 5 for her. The house is mine again, legally clean. Soren and Marina are safe with the Chandlers. Everything's resolved. The wind picks up rattling bare branches overhead. You remember that bridge in 1983? You grabbed my arm on the way down and pulled me toward the safety rail. Doctor said if I'd fallen the other direction, it would have been a 60-foot drop onto concrete. You saved my life that day, and you never once asked for anything in return. I pour the ale slowly over the grave marker, watching dark liquid disappear into frozen ground. You saved me twice, Vince. First with your legs in 1983, then with 40 years of watching over me even when I didn't know I needed it. That envelope you tried to give me, it had everything. Bank statements, timeline, documentation, photographs of forged signatures. You spent your last months gathering evidence to protect me from my own son. The bottle empties. I set it carefully at the base of the headstone. And Eleanor used to say you were the better brother. I always argued, but she was right. You were. For the first time since Saturday morning, I'm not reacting to Clayton's moves. I'm not defending or investigating or planning counter-moves. I'm sitting with my brother saying thank you and letting 40 years of complicated family history settle into something simple. He loved me and he proved it when it mattered most. I stand slowly, knees protesting the cold and damp. Walk back toward the cemetery gates under crisp winter sun breaking through morning mist. Don't look back. Vincent doesn't need me looking back anymore. I drive home and the house feels different, still quiet, but not quite as heavy. At 2 p.m., I open my laptop at the kitchen table and start a video call. The screen shows connecting for 8 seconds before Soren's face appears, Marina crowding into frame beside him. I'm Grandpa. Marina's voice is bright, unguarded. Grandma said you might call today. Soren looks older than he did 3 weeks ago. 14 going on 40, the way kids age when trauma forces acceleration. Grandpa, when can I come visit? I miss your house. The question hits harder than I expect. Soon, Soren. Legal paperwork is processing, custody transfer should finalize by mid-February. When you come back, I'll teach you to read blueprints like a real engineer. I think you'd be good at it. His eyes light up the way Clayton's used to when I showed him how to use a level or read a tape measure. Before greed replaced curiosity. Really like the ones you have in your office. All of them. Starting with the 1983 bridge, the one your Uncle Vincent and I built together. It's still standing. We'll drive out and see it if you want. Marina leans closer to the camera, voice dropping to careful concern. Are you okay? Grandma says you're alone in the big house. I look directly into the camera lens directly at her worried 11-year-old face. I'm okay, Marina, and I'll stay okay because I have you too. The house is big, but it won't be lonely when you're here. She smiles. Behind her I glimpse Constance Chandler moving through the background, giving me a small nod that might be approval or might be shared grief or might be both. We talk for 23 minutes. Soren tells me about a model bridge he's building from popsicle sticks. Marina shows me a drawing she made of our house with all the windows colored yellow like they're lit from inside. Normal grandparent conversation with children who lost their parents 3 weeks ago and are rebuilding normalcy one video call at a time. When we hang up, the kitchen settles around me like an old carpenter checking his own joints. Familiar creaks, solid foundation, ready for another generation. I make dinner for one on New Year's Eve. Nothing elaborate. Soup and bread at the kitchen table Eleanor and I bought 40 years ago. The calendar on the wall still shows December 2023, one day left before it becomes useless. Tomorrow is January 1st, a new year. And this Christmas coming next December, 11 months away, will be the first time in years I won't pretend everything is fine. Because this time it actually is. January arrives quiet and cold. 6 months pass in steady rhythm custody paperwork, finalized in February. Soren and Marina moving back into their old bedrooms in March, followed by school enrollment, doctor appointments, and the slow work of rebuilding trust with children whose parents vanished into federal prison. By December, Christmas arrives. Marina hangs a paper snowflake on the small living room tree, and for the first time in 3 years, the ornament feels like celebration rather than memorial. She holds up another cut from blue construction paper in elaborate geometric patterns. Where should this one go? Grandpa, next to the cardinal ornament, I say. The one Eleanor bought in 2008. Soren arranges wrapped presents beneath the tree, with the precise spacing of someone who thinks in measurements and symmetry. He is 15 now, taller than me by 2 inches, growing into the frame that will hopefully never repeat his father's choices. The doorbell rings at 11. Calvin and Constance Chandler arrive carrying a casserole dish and a bakery box tied with ribbon. We have shared Sunday dinners twice a month since March. 2 families barely acquainted a year ago, now bound by grandchildren and shared protective purpose. Green bean almondine, Constance says. Eleanor used to make it. We gather around the dining table set with Eleanor's good china. 5 people who lost different things in different ways, building something new from what remains. Soren opens the professional grade level I bought him, his face lighting up immediately. Marina unwraps a drafting kit and begins sketching a treehouse floor plan before lunch is finished. Constance leans close while the children compare presents. Thank you for letting us be here. They needed this. We all did. Family isn't what you're born into, I say. It's what you choose to protect. She nods. Her daughter is in federal prison for 3 to 5 years. My son is in federal prison for 7 to 9. We have both lost children, just not to death, which makes the grief more complicated. They are alive, but unreachable. Present, but gone. The absence carries real weight, but so does the presence around this table. After lunch, I stand at the living room window, watching snow fall across the dormant rose bushes Eleanor planted in 1995. I raise a glass of cider. To the family we choose to protect. Calvin and Constance raise theirs. Soren and Marina follow, sensing the importance without fully understanding the weight behind the words. By 10, the children are asleep upstairs. I walk to the workshop and spread the original 1983 architectural blueprints across my workbench. The addition I sketch is small, a reading nook on the east wall where afternoon light falls with a high ceiling, built-in shelving, and space enough for a growing boy to study beside me. I think of Eleanor, who signed the irrevocable trust papers 4 years ago, while I was still blind to Clayton's trajectory. She protected Soren and Marina's inheritance from a son who would have destroyed it, building legal architecture more sound than anything I ever drafted. A good structural engineer never builds for the present. You build for those who will live in the house long after you are gone. Eleanor understood this completely. The house she and I built together fulfilled its purpose, protecting the family we were always meant to shelter. I just did not know it yet. And to you listening to my story, remember this: sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who need watching closest. I don't tell you this story as a hero. I tell it as a father who almost lost everything because I refused to see what was right in front of me. Don't make my mistake. Don't ignore the small inconsistencies, the lies that don't quite add up, the hollow explanations. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I learned that lesson 3 weeks too late. Family justice isn't about revenge. It's about protecting what matters. Eleanor knew this. She built legal walls 4 years before I even understood I'd need them. That kind of foresight doesn't come from paranoia, it comes from wisdom. And I believe God guided her hand when she signed those trust papers, protecting Soren and Marina before they even knew they needed protection. Dad's revenge stories, like mine, aren't about punishment. They're about family justice in its truest form. About standing firm when those closest to you try to tear you down. That's what real family justice looks like. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment and tell me what you think. Should I have handled things differently? Would you have done the same? And if you know someone who needs to hear stories about family justice and standing up for what's right, share this with them. Subscribe to Wise Revenge for more Dad's revenge stories that remind us why truth matters. Thank you for staying until the very end. As always, some details have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling. But the lesson about family trust and standing firm, that part is real.